Good morning.
Morning.
So normally I'm in Sunday school, and I'm just letting you know that the plan for them today, while I'm in here, is that they're going to go outside and plant, because last week the psalm was all about worshiping God and praising Him, and it was all about the mountains will roar and the mountains will tremble and the seas will roar, and the creation was worshiping God, and so the kids are going to go outside today, so they might walk out here and start planting, so you might be a little bit distracted this morning. But that's what they're doing this morning while we're in here. So today's stories and the Bible readings and the Purses with a Purpose, I was thinking about as I was putting everything together, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like such a theme of reaching out towards somebody and coming together closer. Like that all of those stories, that's what happens. So this week, I was asked to go down along with a whole bunch of other people down to the main office where for the organization that I work for. I work for the health system, and it was our health and safety training, which usually, if you ever go to a health and safety training, you fill up your coffee cup really well, and you're like, okay, this is 2 hours, I'm just going to sit, take it in, and one day it might be useful. And you're usually thinking, I'm just going to, take a cushion, get a good back pillow, and just, I'll get the PowerPoint presentation later. Anyway, so they started off, and it was somebody from Labor Relations doing it, and the first presentation. Yeah, so this start of the presentation for health and safety, they started off with this presentation of this new philosophy for our health organization, and it was how we are going to interact with each other, what the expectation for how we interact with each other at work. And it's not just like me to the people at my own level, but it's managers to staff, it's me towards my manager, it's us to the patients, it's everybody to everyone. And they introduced it as the degrees of civility. And I was like, oh, that's new. And they said that the top aspiration for this was that everybody, when they came to work or when they came to get treatment, was that they would be greeted in a warm, welcoming, and friendly manner, that they would be made to feel welcome. That is what the aspiration is. Whether you're a manager, whether you're a staff member, whether you're a patient, that is the aspiration. And that's like the top end of civility. And then they went through like down to the degrees of like lower level of civility, all the way to being like punched in the face, which, sometimes does happen when people get very upset. And that's when you call the police. But at the top level, it was like, this is what we want, and this is what we're striving for. And then they went on to say, well, if you go down the different levels of civility to say, like, somebody's in a rush and they don't say hello to you, or they kind of ignore you in a meeting, or they're always on their cell phone during a meeting, or they never respond to your emails, like, how do you respond? And the labor relations person was really interesting, because she said, often people will come to us and ask us to mediate, but they've never actually talked to the person first. She said, what we want you to do is actually first go to the person. And they said, it's not always easy if it's your manager, but if it's the person you sit next to, and they're like a colleague, what we'd like you to do is to talk with them about what's going on. Okay. And then they gave us, like in a pamphlet, like how to do it. And in my mind, I was thinking, we should learn this in grade 4. Like, why didn't I learn this in school? And so all of a sudden, like, I'm paying attention to this, and it's like step by step, how you talk to somebody about if I have difficulty with your behavior. And better yet, step by step, how should I receive feedback? And I was like, oh my gosh, this could have solved so many problems in my life. And it really struck me that instead of becoming separated, and what they were really noticing at work was that people would separate, and instead of addressing the problem and coming together to try to fix it, is that they would go away and then they would talk behind the other person's back. They would mention something to somebody else. They would never talk to that other person, and then it would just be, well, I don't work well with that person. I'm not going to do projects with that person. And it would just grow and grow and grow and grow. And it would fester, and they would bottle up emotions, and they would just become this huge thing just because they'd never actually had a conversation. And so the labor relations person was saying, well, like, so long as, you haven't gotten punched in the face, could you please just go and have a conversation and try those strategies first. If they don't work, then come to us, there are things we can do. And all of that really ties together with the readings that we had today. So in today, we have all of those expressions of coming togetherness. And that coming togetherness, but stemming from reaching out and trying, right? Because you need to reach out first. And that reaching out comes from a few words that are of a Greek basis. And so there are 4 types, and they all come from an extension of love, types of love that we can see in the world. So there are 4 types, and I checked this out with a solid source of information. So 4, so eros is enjoyment of the senses. So if you enjoy a meal, if you listen to a great concert, if you go to an art show, if you go out into nature, all of that, like enjoyment of the senses, that would be eros. If philia is friends and family, so people that you know, so sharing of love between people that we know, that would be an expression of philia. Agape is God's love. So God's love between God to humans and humans to God is agape. And the last one is caritas. Caritas is an expression of kindness and charity, and it doesn't have to be towards somebody that you know. And agape and caritas are the ones that, well, caritas is what we are seeing a lot in the stories today, and agape as well. So if we so we'll just review the stories from today, because not everybody listens to the Bible readings. So if we go back, there was a story today about Lydia. So Lydia was a really successful businesswoman. You get congratulations again on reading that story, because those were a lot of really tricky words. I was pitying the person who had to read last night as I was thinking. I was like, oh, I don't know who has to do that, but I'm glad it's not me. Okay, all right. So Lydia was a really successful businesswoman. And it says that she traded in purple cloth. So purple was the color of royalty. It was hard to dye clothes in purple, because getting that exact color meant that it was very difficult to get all the ingredients right. So it was actually a very desirable color from royalty. So she was very rich. She had her own household. And Philippi was actually on the main road going east to west as well. So it was a main stopping center as well for anybody who was trading. So they could have stopped off. And so she was doing really well. She had her own place. And so it says she had a faith, but then when Paul and Timothy came to visit, she came to be a believer, even more so. And then she was baptized. And then following her baptism, she saw that they had a need. And she didn't really know them that well, but she saw that they had a need, and she responded practically. And she was like, well, I've got rooms in my home, and you need a place to start what you're doing. You need a place you need a base. So would you please let me offer this to you and come and stay with me? So that was Lydia. So her extending that offer, that reach, that caritas. And I thought that a line that really struck me is, as I was reading, that if you believe my baptism, you will accept my offer. That it was so integral to her faith that that her action was related to her faith. Then the other story that we heard today was of Jesus at the pool. So this pool was thought to, if you were there at the right time, on the right day, then you had a chance of being healed. That was kind of how it worked. And so there were people who were sick who would hang around the pool. And then this pool was outside of the city. And it would occasionally bubble up. Like there was some kind of like gas that was released to make it bubble, is what is thought now. But there was a belief that when the bubbles came up, that was the moment that if you could get into the pool when that happened, then you would be healed. And this man has been there, lying by the pool for a really long time. Like he's been sick for 38 years. And Jesus says to him, well, you're here. And do you want to get well? Like, it's been a while. Like you're still here. And he says, and the man says, yes. And Jesus says, get up off your mat and walk. So the man gets up and he goes. And that's it. That's the end of the story. There's no follow-up. And it's easy to kind of move on to the next Jesus story. But then if we just like take a moment, it's like one of those wow stories. Because he's been there for 38 years. And he hasn't made it into the pool. He's been sick for that long. And for whatever reason, he never was able to get in when the bubbles were coming up. So he wasn't able to see if they were going to help him or not. But the moment that he accepted Jesus's, it wasn't an offer, it was a question of, do you want to get well? He became well. So it really seems that, well, if you want God's love, if we want God's love, it's immediate, it's right there. We just have to say yes. And that is a demonstration of agape, God's love for us. All we have to do is say yes. It is so fast. We do have to accept it. God is always loving us, but if we want it to be in our hearts, we have to let him in. And that is when the changes happen. One thing to note is that the man's life changed considerably after he started walking. Right? There's no, like I said, there's no follow-up to the story. I would have loved to have known what his life was like after. But to go from lying next to the side of the pool to then leaving, he would have had to build his life from the very beginning. He would have had to find a place to live. He would have had to find some kind of income because it was not a welfare country. He would have had to make friends. He would have had to maybe look for his family again if he wasn't in contact with them. He would have had to do everything to build his life from the very beginning, all from then. Now, usually, if we say yes to God, it's not quite that drastic, but the change is immediate. So, Persis with a purpose is also an expression of caritas. It's seeing a need in the community, seeing a need for what is not necessarily something that is of our doing, but it's a need where we can respond and we can asking, always good, and say, would this be an appropriate way to respond? And then providing. And if we just do it on a human level, that caritas, that giving, it's also the basis for the word of charity, of giving extra, of being kind and compassionate. If we do it from just being humans, if we do it on a regular basis, after a while we get tired because it depletes us. And that's where the beauty of having Jesus in our lives is. There is actually another reading from the New Testament for today, and it's the bit where Jesus says to his disciples, I give my peace to you, and I leave you the Holy Spirit. And that Holy Spirit is kind of like rocket fuel. It's like spiritual rocket fuel. And Because if we rely just on ourselves, then we are going to have such a hard time always loving people and being nice and being kind and extending that hand and doing like they want me to do at work, of giving people a warm and cheerful and happy welcome every day, that it's not always going to happen. But with that Holy Spirit, I still may not attain what work wants me to do, but it'll be a little bit easier because my spirit is going to be filled up much, much more because God is with me. So following Jesus and being a faithful Christian and having him in your line of sight really entail, and it means worshiping God, like the kids are thinking about today. It means caring for others. Those are our 2 commandments, right? But that love it's not based on how much money the other person makes. It's not based necessarily on whether we're related to people. It's not based on whether the person smiles at us, whether we get a thank you card. It's just, the command is to love people and to care. So agape and caritas, 2 different types of love, a couple of others as well. And when we follow Jesus, we are asked by God to copy his example and to reach out and care for people that we see, those that we don't see too. So as we go out this week, may we continue that caritas, fueled by God's Spirit. Amen. Amen.